Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. Doing the job the American media maggots won't. Fundamentally changing America. One diaper at a time. Here is, courtesy of the SHR Media Network, the Bloviating Zeppelin.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubble.
And we got a show for you tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. Live and direct right here from the sumptuous, resplendent, and palatial SHR Media Studios, where I am broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, 2 miles east of the Bill Mill, the veritable belly of the beast, the locus of evil on the entire left coast of the United States of America. The Capitol building in Sacramento, California, spelled with a K, at 10th and L Street downtown, where at night you can hear audibly the death of common sense as it moans and wails from that reprehensible building. You can also, when I leave that door at night, smell the evil sulfur and brimstone emanating from that damn building. You got a belly up to the bar, we've kept your seat, and it's great to see you back. Tonight is Tuesday, June the 25th, the year of our Lord 2019, and Flackbait is going to be your bartender tonight. He pours with the best of them. The lava lamp is in fact lighted to my left, your right, indicating that you can listen and chat at shrmedia.com. You can watch the show on the Big Sarge Media Facebook page and the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. I got to tell you this, we don't water our drinks just like we don't water our conversation, politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all right here at the Saloon. Nothing is sacred, the speech is free, but the booze is not. All that we ask is that you flush the damn toilet, jiggle the handle, don't forget to tip your waitress. Now, I should tell you that Jack Alexander is on tonight. And whereas last week we were still in negotiations, the last sum that we had negotiated was, I think, $14,270.95. I managed to eliminate the 95 cents. So he's only charging $14,270 to be here tonight. The other contractual hiccup that we had, you could say, was that he wanted no brown M&Ms in the candy jar in the green room at SHR. So we took care of that. No brown M&Ms. He's like a very popular rock group that we know about in a similar situation. So now that the contractual obligations are all over with, we've solved that, checks have been cut, etc. Appearing tonight, the act you've known for all these years, Jack Alexander, he has agreed quite collegially to be on here. Did I actually say that? I said that yesterday, and I screwed that word up. And, okay, I'm not even going to go back and say it because I got it right this time. He's going to be here for the entire 2 hours, and I think it's going to be great. We're going to learn a little bit about him. I've got his bio here. He sent me a brief, one-page brief, and boy, is it brief. So I'm going to ask him to expand on that. And once we get to know Jack a little bit, then I'd like to expand into Australia, some commonalities. Okay, if you don't know, you probably should. Number one, you should be listening to his radio show. We'll get into that with him in a moment. Jack Alexander is from Australia. He's trying to come into the United States. We'll talk. That's an issue of contention just in and of itself anyway. And we will not gloss that over. We'll get into it. But you need to know he's from Australia, which is why I really appreciate his taking the time to be here, except with this one point. Because he's not in the eastern United States, I don't have to apologize to him for staying up so damn late because it's a little after 1 p.m. It's about 1:05 p.m. in Australia right now, so I really don't feel that bad. So having said all of that, Jack Alexander, good afternoon to you, sir, and welcome to the Saloon. Jack? That was a great intro. Jack, are you there? Okay, I'll tell you what. Because this is BZ, and because it's technology, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this again. And we're going to try this. And I bet I have a better result this time. My guess would be. Jack?
Hello?
There we go. See? Do you remember what I told you about technology? Now you're coming through. Okay. And what would a BZ show be without a cock-up in technology? And the answer is, listen, you expected. So I have to make sure that I give you nothing less. So I gave you a great intro. And
It was.
So Jack Alexander, the way I came across you, and it's no shock, is that you were kind enough to jump into the chat room. You've been there in the chat room quite a number of times over the past couple of weeks and months and whatnot. And we had previously been corresponding by way of email and also by way of Facebook, etc. And you just seemed like a really cool, very interesting cat. And because of that, I wanted to make sure that I got you on the show because you also had some very interesting views. And because you're on Australia, that lends me to, I'm going to attempt to pick your brain tonight about some things that the two countries have in common, go into immigration, etc. And God, let me tell you this, folks, and Jack. This is, again, another show where I have close to 50 tabs, and that means that there are 50 topics, essentially, that I would like to address with Jack Alexander tonight. I'm not going to be able to do that. Past history has told me, you're a goon, BZ, if you think you're going to get close to that. But I am going to try to get to the really good salient stuff because, Jack Alexander, you've got a cool background, a cool CV, and also a couple of stories have come to light today with some odd-ass audio cuts that I'm going to play for everyone and have you also weigh in on, Jack Alexander. So you couldn't have chosen a better night to be here. Folks, if you thought things were weird, oh, the stories I've got for you, and one particular story that should really light your fire and piss you off, including myself, Jack, etc. So, Jack, now that I've said that, the first thing that I always ask new guests, because there's something very important that I want people to know about you. First, Jack Alexander, can you tell people about your social media, where you can be found, and also about any websites that people should go, and or, gosh, you have a radio show. Let's hear about that too.
Yeah, my website is www.jackalexanderexperiment, all one word. I do a 2-hour live stream program from my palatial studios.
I've seen them. They are.
Yeah, I do have a nice setup. It is quite good because I'm wanting to expand it all out. But from 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central, and look, there are too many time zones in the United States for me to keep up with them all. But,
I know.
From 7 p.m. Eastern, Monday to Friday, currently on the Range. If you've got a Roku TV and stuff, I also live stream on Facebook, Normally tonight, Facebook was being a cow, but I'm normally live streaming on Facebook as well. YouTube, if you do a search for the Jack Alexander experiment, that's pretty much where you'll find me.
And on your show, what if people tune in, what kind of thing can they expect to hear? Do you have a particular bent on your show?
Bent? I didn't think that was that sort of show. But
what can they expect?
Look, I'm a rare beast in Australia. I am a true conservative. Because our most conservative political party in Australia is called the Liberal Party. So you imagine what the other guys are like.
Yeah.
And I make Rush Limbaugh look like a limp-wristed liberal.
Wow.
When it comes to being right wing, I believe in small government, and I believe in what the founding fathers of the United States envisaged for true freedom. I believe those gentlemen were absolute geniuses. But and it's diametrically opposed to basically everything that Australia is. Look, Australia is a wonderful country. Don't get me wrong. The people are usually always friendly. The scenery is gorgeous. The animals are completely unique. I mean, I was blessed to grow up living on the Great Barrier Reef.
How cool is that?
How beautiful is that? And I only really appreciated it when I moved away from it. Being able to go spearfishing and diving every other weekend. But I look at the crux of my program is looking at the conservative news and issues of the day in the United States from the perspective of someone who didn't grow up in this piranha tank. I used to say goldfish tank, but since the previous administration, it's gone from being a goldfish tank into a piranha tank, with how hostile things have become here in the United States. So, I give that outside perspective of my observations of what's going on.
I think that is a wonderful and a salient contrast that we'll definitely get into. By the way, I also want to point out to folks. Okay, Jack, I'll tell you this. It's going to come out sooner or later. I had a guy with me back when I was in patrol in the 90s. There's a club where various police officers can go to other countries and stay with another officer for free. And I had a gentleman from New South Wales stay with me for almost a little over a month. And what a great gentleman he was. I learned a ton about the Australian law enforcement system, and I'll tell you a little story about him and our law enforcement system a little later. So I'm going to do my best not to lapse into what you would consider to be your patois, because anytime anymore I hear what the people in the States would consider to be an Australian accent, I have a devil of a time not doing that, because I picked up his accent. And so I want to warn you up front, I may lapse. I'll try my best not to. And the reason I'm saying that is I'm not mocking you in the slightest. It's just that I picked it up and I loved it. And you should probably already know, Jack Alexander, that if you ever come to the States, or if you already have, with that kind of an accent, women are going to be falling all over you. I just thought I'd tell you that up front.
Oh, look, I can't into the U.S. through LAX anymore, because every time previously I've come in, and I'm not disparaging the airport cops, but I'll come out. I might have my Australian stockman's hat on, an oilskin coat.
Oh God!
Depending on the time of year.
I know where you're going.
Traditionally with that, and I have had numerous marriage proposals from voluptuous female airport cops.
What did I say?
Just I'll come out of the international terminal. Oh, what terminal? I'm looking for it. They'll hear the accent. Oh my God, you're Australian. We should get married. We'll have such gorgeous children.
Told you.
And there's my Californian accent.
Folks, we're talking to Jack Alexander, and I can tell you already we're going to have a great time tonight. He's on Facebook, so I'm looking through Facebook. There you are on Facebook. The Jack Alexander Experiment is also on Facebook, so you can find him there. As he indicated, jackalexanderexperiment.com is where you can find him. If you're looking for past shows, you can also find him on YouTube. So go to YouTube and then enter in Jack Alexander Experiment. You can find him there. And I learned this today, that he is also on Twitter. Damn me for not following you on Twitter earlier, but I follow you now on Twitter. You can find Jack Alexander on Twitter at Experiment Jack, all one word, capital E, capital J, at Experiment Jack. So just wanted to make sure I got that information through as well. Now, looking at your bio that you sent, you're a broadcaster. We know that you're on the air. It indicates you're a comedian and a public speaker and a small business owner. So when you spoke publicly, upon which topics generally would you speak?
Mostly on my life. I developed a talk topic many years back entitled "With Our Thoughts We Make the World," and it stemmed when I was a teenager. I'd rush home from school, and on one of the broadcasters in Australia, there was one of those really poorly dubbed Japanese serials,
okay.
And it was called Monkey Magic. And anyone that's sort of in our 50-plus age group has probably heard of it. They were it was typical of the time because it was translated into English, and they didn't care about lip syncing. So the lips would start moving, and like half a second later, the words would start coming out, and then the words would stop, and for another half a second, the lips would keep moving. That sort of really bad dub thing. But in the opening monologue of every episode, they read part of the legend of how a priest and some animal spirits brought the Buddhist scriptures to Japan and to the east out of India. One of them being a monkey god spirit. But as part of that, there was a comment in the opening monologue saying that that the Father Buddha had said, and I'm not Buddhist, but I have looked at it. With our thoughts, we make the world, and whether you're Buddhist, Christian, whatever, that is very much a good sentiment. I mean, I left home at 15 because of alcoholic domestic violence. I lived on the streets for a couple of years. I joined the military. My military career ended in a training accident. There's been disaster along the way that has helped shape me into who I am, and along the way, it has changed my dreams, which is therefore it has changed my reality. And seeing the wisdom of those words that always stuck with me from my childhood. I could sit back like a lot of people do and just think, oh, woe is me, I'm a victim. Mummy and daddy were drunks, they beat me up. They'd rather be at the bar getting drunk than being at home feeding the family and so on. And when they are at home, I could play on that, or I could play on how I didn't want to leave the military the army when I did, but because I was so severely injured, I could no longer meet the fitness requirements. That career was destroyed through no fault of my own. Again, by visualizing that this is an opportunity to go in another direction and making that so, I have changed that reality from being essentially, the victim of childhood abuse or the victim of an unfortunate military training accident and so on, to continue moving forwards. And, I sort of use myself as the example on how you think of your situation. By changing it, by changing the way you think about your own situation, it will permeate out and actually change your life in the way that you think. If you think your life is miserable, I can guarantee you, your life is going to be crap. If you think that you could do better and you keep pushing towards that, your life changes for the better. Not as quickly as you want, and it hasn't worked with me visualizing tonight's lottery numbers yet, but hey, I live in hope.
If I've got it right then, correct me if I'm wrong, yours is not necessarily a cautionary tale, but yours is instead a motivational tale. That how you feature yourself mentally is what generally you're going to be. Am I close?
For the most part, but it is also partially a cautionary tale. Yeah, but for the most part, yeah, it is inspirational. I mean, as I said, we look at a lot of the community leaders, and I'm doing the air quotes thing with that in the United States. What are they teaching people? They go out there and they tell people that you are victims. We see that with the constant the debates that have raised their ugly heads again about reparations for slavery. I mean, slavery in the United States has been gone for more than 150 years. Yet you've still got so-called community leaders out there. Instead of inspiring their community and changing the reality for their community, that they keep them mentally enslaved to this false dichotomy that they are still enslaved. But they're not enslaved to the white person anymore. They're enslaved to this victim mentality. And so while it is part cautionary, it does show that, yeah, look, you can grow up in the worst poverty and have the absolute worst things happen to you. But you can rise above it if you so dream and choose to follow that dream.
I wouldn't disagree in the slightest. It's no shock, and I've said it here before. I've had cancer before, and I've had it multiple times. And I think a great deal to do with that has to be in one's brain, how you look at a lot of life. Everybody's been challenged. I've been challenged. You've been challenged. But one of the things that people used to say about me in patrol is, man, I don't understand how you can go to work day after day after day and see the stuff that you do and not be changed in some way. Yeah, I do get changed, but you either succeed or you fail. It's really no more complicated than that. And the mental addressing of issues is it's your greatest tool. It's the greatest tool at work. It's the greatest tool in your personal life. Your mind is an amazing thing, and I will submit there are so many things that our brains can do that we have not yet even remotely begun to tap. Now, your education, let's go back a little bit. Jack Alexander, to whom we are speaking tonight, and he has his own radio show called The Jack Alexander Experiment, and I highly recommend it. When I get through with the show tonight, go to bloviatingzeppelin.net, and I will have a recap of the show, and I will have a link to his show and all the other places that he is on the internet, and then you can have links to his YouTube show, to his YouTube channel. I'll have links to his show. You can see it, you can watch it. I highly recommend it. I have watched it myself. Well, let's go back a little bit to your education. You were fairly well educated, if I'm not mistaken, and you got a degree. I just don't remember where, sir.
I got several degrees. I was never keyed up for study when I was younger. I think like most people, and with the problems at home and so on. I didn't go to college until after my military service.
Okay.
And given the changing climates and so on, I first went back and did aerospace engineering because I had learnt to fly in the military.
Wow. Okay.
And and well, I was part of one of the Australian Special Forces units. And the idea is if you get trapped behind enemy lines and it's too hot to extract you, if you've got someone in your team that is capable of either flying a helicopter or a plane, steal a damn thing, steal one of them, and fly yourself home.
Right.
And it doesn't matter whether it's a plane, a truck, a helicopter, and so on. And I always thought this was garbage until one exercise where we're actually exercising against U.S. forces up in far north Queensland, and we'd sat there and observed them. And look, I don't want to cast aspersions on the Marines, but they were actually being a little bit lazy this night and relying too closely. They'd occupied this area, and they were relying too closely on the local town police officer on who was the local and who wasn't. And we'd noticed that they were letting the local guys through without stopping at the checkpoint. So we literally went onto a guy's cattle ranch, stole his 18-wheeler cattle truck, cut the trailer up with a gas axe to put our Jeeps in the back of it, welded it back together, and drove through the checkpoint and ambushed them.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. That's what Dick Marcinko would have done.
But the crazy thing was, up until that point, I thought, well, when this exercise is over, we are going to be up for a court-martial on this. No, the Australian government just bought the rancher a new trailer because we cut his up with a gas axe.
That's exactly what Dick Marcinko's Red Cell would do. He'd find a way to infiltrate on Navy bases, and he got in big trouble. But hey, Jack Alexander, that's nothing more than thinking out of the box. Let me tell you right now, we got 4 more minutes before the bottom of the hour break. I can tell you right now, someday, somewhere, if we ever cross paths, somehow, dude, I am going to sit you down for a couple of hours. We are going to knock back some suds and tell each other some stories. Because I can tell you right now, you likely have an assload of stories, and I know I do too. So, boy, if we ever come together, that will be a grand, grand day. Okay, all right, from your bio, I knew that you were in the military. It says 10 years. It says you were deployed multiple times. UN mission to Sinai, Desert Storm, and Somalia in support of U.S. forces. There's a great story you told about the Marines. Damn them for being stupid, silly and fattening. You get what, if you're not intelligent about things, stuff is going to happen. But I did not know that you were also a pilot. So were you rated for rotor or fixed wing, something like that?
I had both because it was as the squad leader, a lot of it actually fell on me, and I had a passion for both. Most of my hours though were in fixed wing. Okay. I think I got about 800 hours racked up as pick in fixed wing, and only about 50 in rotary wing. I didn't get to fly the helicopters all that much.
Okay, but just enough to be able to steal what's necessary, and that's really important. You can't minimize that stuff. So when you were now, you indicated you were in Special Forces. Oh, darn it, we only got 2 more minutes. Okay, we got 2 more minutes before the bottom of the hour break, and maybe I should ask you this. In the Australian Special Forces, my guess would be that is how and under what conditions you were deployed to either Desert Storm or Somalia in those situations? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All righty. So I'm not going to ask specifics, but I'm just going to intimate that your military background is well-rounded and what would be apparently very deep, all the way from an aviation aspect to, you said that you were a leader of some sort. So you come with a depth and breadth of experience in the military. And the reason I'm making that point is, and we're just about to go to a break. The reason I'm making that point, folks, is when we come back, we're talking to Jack Alexander. And once I go a little bit more into his life and his background and whatnot, I have a ton of stories, some that occur in his backyard that I'd like him to weigh in on, but also in consideration of his military background, I'd like Jack to weigh in on some of the geopolitical things that are occurring right now all across the planet. So, folks, we're listening to Jack Alexander. I am BZ on the SHR Media Network, and this is the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. We'll be back after this break and talk again. Already, I can tell you, I'm having a great time with Jack Alexander. Please don't go anywhere.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics.
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
And all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on shrmedia.com.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
Hey girls, Carry Girl Gear is here. More and more women every day are concealed carrying, participating in competitive shooting, and getting firearms training. It's not a boys' club anymore, and we don't have to shop in their stores anymore either. Finally, a cool and unique clothing line just for women. Dope tees and hats for the patriotic concealed carry and 2A girl. So what are you waiting for? Go check out carrygirlgear.com today.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
The new show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, every Wednesday. Live and direct on the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com. Be there.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capital, the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern, only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct, right here on the SHR Media Network, where I am broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California. Tonight, my guest for the entire 2 hours is a wonderful guy with whom I am already having a great time by the name of Jack Alexander. And I got a ton of questions, a ton of stories to go over with you. Before we do that, though, Jack, you have a background in radio. I'm looking at your bio here, and it indicates that you created one of Australia's dedicated online radio stations. What happened with that, or what are the circumstances about that? I did not know that.
Well, my first radio gig, I was about 14 years of age. My parents were running a small livestock auction business, and Tuesday afternoons after school, I'd drop by the office, pick up the script, go down to the radio station, and I would read it live on air. And that was my first taste. And then when I was in the later stages of my military career, one of the guys in my squad, his brother was the news director at one of the leading FM radio stations in Sydney. And because I had a warped and twisted sense of humor, it resonated with the host of the breakfast show, and I became a cast member of that show, doing character voices, having a warped sense of humor. Basically, if there was some sort of double innuendo piece of comedy about feminine hygiene products, I probably wrote it and voiced it on the show. But then when amalgamations started happening, that they relaxed the requirements on how many media outlets a single ownership entity could own, when they relaxed that, we started, like here in the United States, big companies buying up radio stations in every market,
right,
and putting it all together. And the parent company of the station I was with expanded too quickly. And they, rather than going into bankruptcy, they trimmed some of the their staff base down. So some of us superfluous talent evolved with some of the bigger shows, got 86 out of it. And because I loved every minute of being on the Doug Mulray show. He was a wonderful coach, a wonderful mentor to that. He always treated not only his cast members as family, but their immediate family as well. He was a wonderful guy to work for, and we're still good friends even today. But because I'd been on his show, and he had a very particular style of comedy. It was very much on the British vein of innuendo, double entendre.
Right.
It wasn't tits in your face, but you got that verbal description without saying it, and you could visualize it very easy. But that made it very hard to continue getting work in the industry. I was at another station in another city for a little period of time, but we just didn't gel as cast. So, with that, I realized that I loved the medium. I loved broadcasting.
You bet.
It may have been my eccentric personality and so on. So the internet had developed to the point in Australia at that time where it was possible to do that. I just wanted to do it. So I MacGyvered together a studio out of what bits and pieces I had and just jerry-rigged this whole thing together. And it turned out to be one of the country's first dedicated internet broadcast sites. Just out of wanting to keep my skills current, and then I had a more recent body of work that was different for what I was doing on the Mulray show to show that I wasn't just a one-trick pony from that I was my own person. And I tried to do essentially what I was doing in my own way, but still doing 4 hours of live breakfast comedy 5 days a week. But instead of having a cast of 20, I was trying to do it all on my own. I was writing, I was voicing, I was recording sketches, then doing the live show, post-production stuff, and I was killing myself. As long as, along with the business aspects of trying to run the radio station.
Right.
And
okay.
I was just killing myself. So I had to reinvent. Again, it was one of those situations where, the situation I'm in just wasn't ideal. And what I also noticed, because of the music that I was playing a lot of what we called in Australia pub rock. Now, to give a more a take of what Aussie pub rock from the 80s sounds like, look at a lot of the more rock-sounding new country that is now being played in the United States.
See, when you said pub rock,
identical.
When you say pub rock, the first thing I'm thinking is maybe some Status Quo, some AC/DC, maybe some Slade, a lot of British stuff, but apparently that's absolutely untrue.
Oh, no, look, I'm a big fan of the new romantic period of modern British pop. Duran Duran, ABC, Spandau Ballet, that sort of thing. There was a lot of that there, but most of the Australian stuff that was being played, and I was trying to fly the flag and so on, but a lot of the Australian stuff like Men at Work,
okay,
Dragon, who were actually imports from New Zealand, Eurogliders, who were all the members were British, but they found themselves here in Australia. AC/DC was definitely there, and so on. 1927 was another one. All of that music was being played in the bars and clubs here in Australia back before slot machines. They ripped out the stages and put slot machines in almost all the bars.
Right.
And that was the apprenticeship that a lot of bands did. And it was really good, honest music.
So you would have been talking about, you would have been, okay, this is where the rock dude in me begins to pick my brain. Okay, you would have been talking about also Midnight Oil. You probably would have been talking about In Excess, Cold Chisel, Silverchair.
Definitely.
Hoodoo Gurus, and now, okay.
Definitely, yep.
Okay, now I'm tapped out.
Midnight Oil, not so much, because they were very much a political protest band.
Okay.
And a lot of their stuff was they were popular in America in the college circuit because they were anti-American.
Okay.
And Peter Garrett, who was the lead singer of Midnight Oil, went on to become a federal politician, which should really speak volumes.
Really? I didn't know that. Very interesting.
And but most of those acts, yes, were definitely in my mix. But what I was finding, because I wasn't limited to the distance that a transmitter could reach, the way terrestrial radio does,
right.
I found out that through looking at the figures and the analytics that were coming back, the majority of my audience was coming from the United States.
And now you know why.
It wasn't until I came over in 2009 that I really twigged on why. Because, when you're listening to Keith Urban, what Keith Urban's recording now was, and they're calling it country, was what we were listening to in the 80s, and we were calling it pub rock.
Okay.
Just maybe a little bit more fiddle and a little bit more banjo and a little bit more pedal steel thrown into it. But, it's very much, and it just grabbed me instantly, the new country thing in the US. In fact, my kids, even now, Dad, you used to listen to good music. You go to America and you come back and you listen to all this country shit. It's a great piece of ribbing that goes on between me and my two oldest kids. But yeah, but because of that, I got an American audience, and I was also in the process of reinventing what I was doing, and I started doing my observations of what was going on in the US, because I started to change the structure of the show to meet with my growing American audience, which meant I started observing what was going on in the United States and trying to make heads or tails of it. I was, asking my audience, what does this mean? Because, the first time I saw the general election process there, and why does it take so long to elect someone in the United States? I mean, you've got to have an election to vote for who you're going to elect.
It's true.
I mean, what the hell? Stuff like that. Plus I didn't understand the whole O.J. Simpson thing as well, with the changes in the legal system. I mean, okay, he was found guilty, but they were able to bankrupt him in civil court for a crime that he was found innocent of. Well, okay, not guilty of. And that didn't. So it started with me asking questions, and it continued on to that, and through that we get up to the 2008 general election and the Radio America network. I had been doing a few bits and pieces and had become a fan of a couple of their programs, because I'd listened to those after I was live on air, and they'd asked me to, from an outsider's perspective, what would the policies of the candidates mean for America's allies, like Australia? How would this financial policy that was being proposed by one of the candidates, how is that going to affect the Australian economy and that trade relationship? And that really began to open me up to the American audience. And towards the end of that election cycle, they said, look, it's in your best interest to come over and talk to us. And, I thought, well, hey, I'm about to make the big time. So I booked the ticket the next day and came over. And while that didn't work out, it did open up a lot of doors. And, I got to meet some fantastic people. I had some very interesting conversations with one very interesting person in American history, that being G. Gordon Liddy, who was a show host at Radio America at the time. And I got a very unique insight to the whole Watergate thing from an insider's perspective. And, it just grew from there. So, more and more the music side of things went away because, well, what I was playing was sort of getting a little bit stale, and what was being released at the moment is still not, music has essentially been dying. I hadn't quite discovered the connection between the new country thing. So I moved more over to a talk radio format. And started doing that, and this is how we get to where we are today.
Okay, you have a wide and varied background, and it's in the military, in aviation, in special forces, in politics. You have an interest in Australia, and you have a burgeoning interest in the United States. We corresponded back and forth a little bit on emails, and you have a very interesting take on the deep state, etc. Before we come across here to the United States, I want to start with some topics that are occurring in Australia right now, one that occurred in the past, and another one that you sent me some information on. I have about maybe a 1.5 or 2 minute cut on this, and you were very alarmed by this particular topic and this particular incident that occurred in Australia. A little bit later on, when we have some time, I also want to ask you what you think of Scott Morrison, who's the PM of Australia right now, but we'll get to that.
This week.
Yeah, this week. But first, I want to start out with this story, and it's about a 1.5 minutes. Folks, you're going to hear this, and then, Jack, I want you to attempt to explain what's happening and why it's significant in this story.
There's a story developing in Sydney now. AFP officers are raiding the ABC studios at Ultimo. Nine's Liz Daniels is there. Liz, good morning. What sparked the raid?
Well, the short answer is, Davina, we don't know. 3 Australian federal police officers have just arrived here at the head office of ABC in Ultimo. They walked in through the front door, checked in with security, and then went on into the offices. Now, we understand they will be carrying out a search, but exactly what they're here for or what they're looking for or why they're here, we don't know. What we do know is that this comes a day after the News Corp journalist Annika Smethurst had her home in Canberra raided over allegations that an unauthorised leak of national security information was included in a story that she wrote more than a year ago. Then yesterday we also heard from 2GB broadcaster and Channel 9 host Ben Fordham that he's also been contacted by senior officials and told that a Home Affairs investigation has been sparked over his story about 6 asylum seeker boats attempting to reach Australia. He's now been told that that could also lead to an AFP investigation. But to bring you back here to ABC headquarters today, 3 federal police officers arriving, quite an unusual sight to see AFP walking in to our national broadcaster.
Liz, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, the AFP, for those who don't know, you can probably take a guess, is the Australian Federal Police. You corresponded with me about this, and you were fairly lit up. Now, maybe, Jack Alexander, you can explain to everybody the significance of this story.
Well, everyone keeps saying, why do you want to move to America? You know, it's essentially the same as here. And I said, well, look, there is no right to free speech in Australia. There is no true freedom of the press in Australia, and this goes on to show it. Now, what has happened in these incidents? There's 3 separate incidents that were talked about. They're in no way connected to each other beyond the fact that the federal police are wanting to shut it down. Now, all newsrooms in Australia have someone that is licensed as a censor.
Licensed as a censor.
Yeah. And anything that might be deemed questionable on the grounds of national security or so on, if that censor thinks, well, hang on, this is questionable, they will pass that up the line to the government, and it will get what's known as it'll either get returned back as yep, that's fine, or it will get Article 10. And Article 10 in broadcasting law is you will not even mention this.
Okay.
And the thing is, now this has gone through this process. In each of these cases, the journalists would have submitted their copy or their video reports and so on to get approved for broadcast or publishing. Now, all of these stories are like 12, 18 months. Some of them are, one of them was even 2 years old.
Yes, we heard that it was that old.
Yeah. And, so it's passed, either the censor has screwed up and said, yep, this is fine, or it's come back from being up the chain and said, yeah, it's fine. But because if it had been Article 10 at the time, each of those journalists and the editors at large at these organizations could have been arrested on the spot. But now, a year later, they're now wanting to do this. And the only thing I can find in common between the 3 journalists involved is that in the lead up to the last general election a few months ago, every one of these journalists was critical of the Morrison government.
Okay.
That is the only connection I can find. And they are using the national security laws to shut them up. And they are not the first journalists that have been targeted.
So, Jack Alexander, let me make sure that I've got this correct. Inside each and every newsroom across Australia, and it's not an island, folks, it's a damn continent, okay? Don't think that way. in each newsroom, there is essentially a censor. Now, you said that is a government of Australia, a state censor. Is that correct?
No. Someone will be. It'll be an employee of the company, but they will have the authority. They will be licensed essentially in that role.
All right. So I could make an excellent argument, especially if it were a government censor. I could make an excellent argument that the onus of whatever it is that the journalists would suffer should fall on the shoulders of that individual rather than the station or the journalists themselves. Wouldn't it be more proper, more in keeping, saying that it's the job of that censor to make sure that these things go on? Or you could also ask this question: without sufficient knowledge on a given topic, how could you hold that censor responsible if they're not aware of certain aspects of what the government is or is not doing? Or, let me back up in a larger umbrella question, are they just pissed because people were pointing out the foibles of Scott Morrison? I'm sorry, that's a multi-pronged question, but I'm trying to understand the situation here. Whose real responsibility is it? It doesn't seem to me like it's the responsibility of the journalists or the station if there's a screener to do their job there. What am I missing?
Well, that's it. I think it's retribution for the bad media that Scott Morrison was getting.
Okay.
That's my personal take on it. But they're using what I found out to be almost 75 laws associated that are now making it harder for journalists to do investigative journalism in Australia. These to have been broadcast a couple of years ago. They were passed back then, and if there was an issue back, then it should have been done back then, which is why I believe it was a revenge thing, and why they haven't targeted those people that are signing off on this, and now because these are completely unrelated stories. But they're not only that, they're saying these people, these journalists, have violated things like the espionage laws because they're not, they've encrypted their notes with a form of encryption that's not approved by the government. In fact, they've just recently brought in a law that if journalists want to encrypt their notes, they have to use a particular encryption algorithm that the Australian government already knows how to crack.
Then what's the point?
Exactly. They're issuing subpoenas and search warrants for their original notes, their contact lists, who their sources were. That sort of thing, and they're using the terrorism and the espionage laws to compel these journalists to give these notes over, and that's a lot in the situation. I mean, I thought it was bad when they brought in the sedition in media laws because they were so loosely written, and that was under a couple of administrations ago. But it just seems to be getting so much worse.
Okay, that's a perfect lead-in to my next question. Folks, we got 2 more minutes before the top of the hour break. We are speaking to Jack Alexander, live and direct from Australia. And again, Jack, thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
The 2 questions that I want to ask, and the second one is going to be big, really big. But the first one that I think we'll only have time to address when we come back after the break. The first one is, okay, since you seem to think that things have started to get worse, are things actually getting worse in terms of free speech in Australia? Then the second question that I'm going to have, which it's almost like dropping a bomb on the radio, will be, I'd like to speak to you, Jack Alexander, about firearms in Australia, about the Australian confiscation, about liars figuring and figures lying, because we have been given only one side of the story in the United States, and now that I have someone who would definitely know both sides of the story, when we come back, we're going to continue to talk about Jack Alexander. I'm going to ask him the question about things getting maybe a little bit worse in terms of rights and liberties in Australia. And then I'm going to go back to, I think it was 1995, 1996, when that occurred, and I'm going to ask Jack Alexander about firearms, because that was a huge issue then, and I'm guessing that it's a huge issue now. And my guess would be, you haven't heard the full story. I'm hoping you're going to hear the full story in about 5 minutes. Don't go anywhere, folks. I'm BZ, the Bloviating Zeppelin. We're listening to Jack Alexander, and you're on the Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct on the SHR Media Network.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics.
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
And all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on shrmedia.com.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
Hey girls, Carry Girl Gear is here. More and more women every day are concealed carrying, participating in competitive shooting, and getting firearms training. It's not a boys' club anymore, and we don't have to shop in their stores anymore either. Finally, a cool and unique clothing line just for women. Dope tees and hats for the patriotic, concealed carry, and 2A girl. So what are you waiting for? Go check out carrygirlgear.com today.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
The new show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Wednesday. Live and direct on the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com. Be there.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capitol, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern, only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's the second hour of the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where I am broadcasting live and direct in the sumptuous, palatial, and resplendent SHR Media Studios. And tonight we have the luxury of having the... I'm entertained as hell, and I'm really glad that he's here tonight. Jack Alexander is talking to us all the way from Australia, saving me a 14-hour ride on a thin aluminum tube. So if for no other reason, I'm grateful for Jack being here tonight, and I don't have to get on an airplane for 14 hours and watch my knees lock up. That having been said... I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
I thought all this time, if it wasn't Boeing, you ain't going.
Well, that's true. They're coming back. Airbus is a challenge, but Airbus is going through its own kerfuffle right now. For example, the A380, the largest commercial airplane in the world, they've decided they're going to cut that baby off at the nuts because it's not making money like they thought it was going to. That's a couple of $1 billion pissed away by Airbus, but that's a story for another time. I asked Jack Alexander before we went on break. We're talking about freedoms and liberties. They're extremely valuable to Jack. They're extremely valuable to me. In Australia, in the United States, we're feeling massive pressure. Our freedoms and liberties, we're watching them kind of drift and float away. And so the first question I had in the second hour for Jack is, do you feel that Australia is under pressure like never before, where you're really beginning to seriously wonder if your liberties and freedoms are going away? And if they're going away, Jack Alexander, can you get them back? Is it getting worse instead of getting better, I suppose the apt question would be.
Oh, look, it's getting worse, but unfortunately the apathy of most Australians is, if it doesn't interfere with drinking beer and watching sport on the weekends, they don't give a rat's ring. And it's the same with politics. In Australia, you must legally attend a voting point for elections to at least get your name crossed off. You can just cross out the names and put Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and whatever on the ballot if you want. That's perfectly, but you must turn up to at least the polling point to get your name crossed off the roll. If they didn't do that, no one would turn up, even though it's elections are held on a Saturday, because it gets in the way of, as I said, drinking beer and watching sport. And for most people, it doesn't, they just don't care enough because it doesn't affect them. But when you're in an industry like we are, that is about educating people, and trying to show them what's going on behind the scenes, it's getting very dangerous. Now, with these 3 search warrants that have recently been executed, for a couple of days, the media was all up. They're infringing on our privilege, and they're using the privilege word, not the right, but the privilege, our privilege of a free press. And like all privileges, they can be removed as being demonstrated. But within a couple of days of that, everyone sort of realized, hang on, if we don't shut the hell up, they're going to come after us. And when I started looking at it, into what was going on, I started getting more and more worried that they are expanding, as I said, the terrorism and espionage laws to stop journalists from investigating stories that are key to educating the people on what's going on. That accompanied with the sedition laws that are the media sedition laws that are already in place, that were so loosely worded. I mean, this is how badly the sedition laws were worded. When I was running my online radio station here in Australia, under the sedition laws, if I was to run an election advertisement for anything other than the incumbent member, I could be actually charged with sedition in media. That's how poorly these laws were written. And
of course, that's insane.
Yeah. But there's that. I mean, I couldn't report on terrorism-related issues here, because as soon as you mention the ethnic group or the religious group that comes in there, you're in violation of the racial and religious vilification laws. So, if a bunch of people go on a riot, like happens, we have race right problems here in Australia, but they just don't cover them that much anymore, because as soon as you mention it was a group of Muslims, next thing, your broadcast company is at risk of losing their license. The journalist that covers it, those ethnic groups, are allowed to take them to civil court and to the cleaners. I mean, it has happened time and time again. We had an incident with one journalist that was locked up. Admittedly, he broke the law in naming a convicted pedophile. But the courts had sealed his name because he had connections with senior members within the government. And they didn't.
Okay.
And they didn't want that coming out leading up to an election. And Darren Hinch, the journalist's name was, he said, look, I am about to break the law, but morally I have to do this. I have to do what is morally right and what my moral code stands for. And, he'd been incarcerated as a journalist throughout his career 3 or 4 times, maybe even as many as 5, for doing stuff like that was morally right but legally wrong, and exposing the connection between some of the people that were doing some very shady stuff and their connection to senior officials within the government, and it's on both sides. And, these new laws that have come in, there have been 75 new laws come in specifically targeted at restricting the media from covering terrorism-related stuff or even foreign collusion with, in the election process here. And these have been bipartisan laws. It's not, the left side or the right side trying to hide the shady shit they're doing. This is the government as a whole. These have been bipartisan bills, and they have been passed with phenomenal levels of support and very little dissension.
You don't need that in the United States. What I term the American media maggots, they don't need laws for something like that. They automatically collude with leftists and Democrats. It's just a given anymore. Laws, we don't need your stinking laws. We just do it in and of ourselves. I also went back to a journalist named a convicted pedophile in the United States. Once you're convicted, and basically during the trial as well, unless you're a juvenile, your name is going to be known. So that in and of itself is kind of an odd thing. So there is a major governmental clampdown continuing with regard to the dissemination of information from apparently a media that really wants to do its job, as opposed to the American media maggots in the United States of America who don't want to do their job. Hence, they don't need a law for that. That's crazy.
The crazy thing is a lot of the journalism colleagues here. I think there's 2 camps. There are the rabble rousers like Darren Hinch, Alan Jones, John Laws in his earlier stages. John Laws would have been our equivalent to Rush Limbaugh as far as listenership base. And at one stage, he was the highest paid radio talk show host in the world.
Wow.
He was pay-wise, he was beating Limbaugh for many, many years, even though Australia's only got like 10% of the population of the US. But even they've sort of taken a step back. A lot of journalists in Australia see that are on the left. They're not so much worried about it because they know that what they're doing is their resume to get jobs at stations like CNN. Rosemary Church, as a news presenter at CNN, is a great example of that. Okay. She spent the majority of her journalism career at the ABC, the national broadcaster. And I was surprised as hell when I was channel switching one night to find her hosting a program on CNN in the United States.
Really?
And a lot of it, so those that are on the left, the journalists that are on the left are sort of pushing that way. But the journalism schools here are beginning more and more to push them to the left. The older school guys, they were more about giving the facts and letting you decide. Now it's more of a case of we will tell you what you are to think. I mean, even when you apply to journalism school in Australia now, one of the key selection criteria to get into journalism school is to have a folio of fictitious writing.
Really? Okay. Biden would fill that. He's a good plagiarist. We've had a number of journalists who've been wonderful plagiarists here in the United States. Funny thing is,
no, they still wanted the original material, but they wanted you to write fiction. The very much the mantra of a lot of this is never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And hence, I guess that's why they've got the requirement for you to be a good, to be a journalist, you need to be a good writer of fiction.
Okay. All right. I get it. So before it gets better, Jack Alexander, would I be right in saying it's only going to get a little worse?
I'm to the point thinking that Australia is a lost cause. They have descended too far down into that rabbit hole to come back. And because linking into the second part, your second question, because in '96 they disarmed essentially the entire population. The population does not have access to the tools to regain that freedom.
Okay, you open that door, I'm going to walk right through it. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to predicate this. Let me do a little bit of a setup, Jack Alexander, so people have an idea of what we're talking about, because unfortunately I believe a lot of people are unaware of what happened in Australia. And they need to be. They need to wake up. America, you need to wake the hell up. I've said this for quite some time. I'm looking at a story from Vox.com, which leans left. And what they were saying in this story is it's worth considering, and this is post a particular shooting in a Santa Fe high school, it's worth considering as one data point in the pool of evidence about what sorts of gun control policies do and do not work, the experience of Australia. Between October 1996 and September 1997, Australia responded to its own gun violence problems with a solution that was both straightforward and severe. Now, I love the euphemism. It collected, air quotes, it collected roughly 650,000 privately held guns. It was one of the largest, now the word comes out, it was one of the largest mandatory gun buyback programs in recent history. Let me go a little bit further with that. I am looking now at a couple of ads that were published in Australia. One of them is in massive bold print saying, have you handed in your illegal firearm? There's another one that says, duck hunters, attention, turn in your firearm. Then there's another one with a shotgun that says, you'll be surprised what banned guns are worth these days. There's another one that I clipped out of a newspaper. You'll love this one, folks. Personal protection is no reason to have a gun. That's straight out of Australia. Now there's another one that I'm looking at, and there's a picture of naked guys in a shower facing a shower head scrubbing in. It says at the top of that picture, think about it now. Or you could get 12 months to think about nothing else in terms of turning in your firearms. And then it says in large print, this is your last chance. Well, 650,000 firearms were turned in. Oh, here's another one. It says, no reason to have a gun. If you own a gun which you keep to protect yourself, your family, or your property, you must dispose of it legally. Under the latest gun laws, personal and property protection are no longer considered acceptable reasons to possess any type of firearm or to get a license. If you possess any gun, you must have a license and et cetera, safe storage of the weapon, blah, 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 blah. Basically, it was gun confiscation. Another one says, have you handed in your illegal firearm? Well, also this story that I'm reading from Vox says the headline is, Australia confiscated 650,000 guns. Now, this story comes out in late 2018, by the way. And it says, murders and suicides plummeted. Well, that's what the left story is in America. The leftist story is, and let's make no mistake, leftists, let's be plain and clear, I've said it for quite some time, leftist Democrats and the American media maggots want gun confiscation here in America, or the abject elimination of the Second Amendment completely. As you already pointed out, Jack Alexander, without the Second Amendment, the First Amendment is in jeopardy, or the essentially the same thing. Without the ability to defend yourself, your right to free speech is in jeopardy. That's how you were translating it in terms of Australia. Now, this is the narrative on the left. It will come some point in the upcoming debates where one of these leftist dingleberries is going to say something like, yes, you know what? We really do. We need outright gun confiscation. Now, because you're in Australia, that's the setup. Jack Alexander. So tell us the truth. I'm sure gun crime plummeted precipitously, and there's no reason for anyone in Australia to have any firearms because they've already been collected, and the entire continent of Australia is safe, proper, and proud. That's correct, isn't it?
No. Quite simply, no. Gun crime has escalated. In fact, it escalated to the point where, violent crime escalated right across the board in Australia, to the point where state police, state and federal law enforcement had to start reclassifying crimes. And I give you the example of an acquaintance of mine, a single woman living alone. The drug addict who lived over the back fence broke into her apartment and raped her. She eventually chased him off when she grabbed a set of scissors, and he ran away, and she stumbled out in the street to get help. When it came to trial, they had dropped the violent sexual assault off the docket, so that it was just he was only being charged with break and enter. They were dropping the violent crimes off the dockets of so many. I mean, immediately after the years immediately after the ban happened, the crime gangs within Australia went on a shooting spree.
Imagine that.
You've just got to look at the Lygon Street gang wars during the 1990s and early 2000s. And, they were just, mafiosa-type crime gangs that took it to the street. People with, guns that were supposedly no longer on the streets anymore would just walk up to an opposing gang member in an alfresco Italian restaurant on Lygon Street, where most of the Italian restaurants are in Melbourne. Just literally walk up, shoot them, and walk away. And, this went on, and it went on tit for tat. And, for the whole time, since the 96 gun ban happened, we kept hearing that these were guns that were never registered to start with, so the police didn't know about them. They'd been hidden in the attic and what have you, and that these were old weapons. Well, that turned out to be a load of codswallop as well. Every major shooting that has happened in the last 20 years has been perpetrated with a firearm that was, A, never legal to import into Australia at any stage, or more often than not, wasn't even manufactured prior to the 96 gun ban. And that whole argument finally went out the window that the ABC on their Four Corners program had to finally admit, or the federal police had to finally admit after 20 years of pushing this line that these were heirloom guns that nobody knew about, that in fact there is a black market gun problem in Australia.
No.
Because the Lindt Chocolate Cafe incident is a terrorist attack, was perpetrated with a sawn-off shotgun that was smuggled into the country just shortly towards the attack. There was a civilian forensic IT specialist that was shot and killed in front of New South Wales Police Headquarters by a 16-year-old jihadi with a Gen 3 Glock, not 6 months after Gen 3 Glocks were released to the world. So if that whole argument falls on that, and in the end, the federal police have had to come out and say, look, we are aware that there are something like 20,000 illegal firearms that have been smuggled into the country by the religion of peace, and we only know where 1,200 of those are. And these are including the fully automatic versions of the Glock pistols. And stuff like that has never been legal on the mainland. For a period of time, fully automatic weapons were allowed in the island state of Tasmania, and they also had a manufacturer down there who made fully automatic weapons. But they were only allowed in that particular state or by the federal government. I mean, even the federal government is so hell-bent against assault weapons. Recently, the Victoria State Police Department was allowed to purchase AR-15s, not the fully automatic M4 varieties, but just the general run-of-the-mill civilian semi-automatic version for their special operations group.
Well, and I'm sure
they won't even allow the SWAT teams fully automatic weapons.
I'm sure that when that happened, weren't a lot of people's panties set on fire when they were granted use of semi-automatic rifles? Oh, zounds, let us clutch our hearts and fall over, urinating all over ourselves. Or words to that effect.
Well, in Victoria, they were already complaining when they went from the old Smith & Wesson revolvers to the Smith & Wesson M&P. They went from a .38 special holding 6 rounds to a 9mm semi-automatic that held 15 or 16 rounds. And Victoria, they were always arguing against that. Oh, Victoria's the state with the most number of police shootings. We can't give them a gun with more bullets. But on every one of those shoots, they were deemed justified shoots. Somebody pointed a weapon at a police officer, and the public, there's this outcry by the public. Hang on, you shot the poor bastard 6 times.
No.
If we give you something that holds 10 or 15 rounds, you'll shoot them even more. And even when they were using the .38 specials, they were using light loads.
Right, probably.
And then wondering why you had to shoot the poor guy times to put him down.
Yeah, round-nosed lead, likely. Okay, it's the bottom of the hour. We've done firearms. When we come back, I want to kind of wrap up firearms a little bit when we come back in about 5 minutes or so. We're talking to Jack Alexander. Then we're going to talk about an issue that is near and dear to his heart that's occurring and basically falling apart on our shores. And if there were ever an issue in a situation where the United States is a bumbling dummy, it's this, immigration. So when we come back, we're going to talk to Jack Alexander about immigration. I've got a couple of stories to regale. And then I'm going to ask Jack Alexander to weigh in on immigration as well. He, too, has a couple of stories about immigration. I am the Bloviating Zeppelin. I am BZ. You're listening to the Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show live and direct right here on the SHR Media Network. We're coming into the final half hour. Thanks again to Jack Alexander for being here tonight. Don't go anywhere.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics.
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
And all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on shrmedia.com.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
Hey girls, Carry Girl Gear is here. More and more women every day are concealed carrying, participating in competitive shooting, and getting firearms training. It's not a boys' club anymore, and we don't have to shop in their stores anymore either. Finally, a cool and unique clothing line just for women. Dope tees and hats for the patriotic concealed carry and 2A girl. So what are you waiting for? Go check out carrygirlgear.com today.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
The new show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Wednesday. Live and direct on the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com. Be there.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capitol, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern. Only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's the final half hour on the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where I am on the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com, that is where the chat room resides these days. We're speaking to Jack Alexander, and he was gracious enough to be here for the entire 2 hours. I grandly appreciate it. We found out a lot about his background, what he did, his service in the military, his interest in radio, his interest in politics. We're talking about firearms and the confiscation in Australia. I'm going to wrap that section up with, and that's a story that I could spend another hour on just by itself, and I'm sure, Jack Alexander, you could too. But let me wrap up this with a final question for you, and then we're going to change topics over into immigration. The final question for you, Jack Alexander, would be this. If you had anything to say to the people in the United States having experienced what you saw and did yourself in Australia, what words of wisdom or caution might you shower upon the residents of the United States?
Never surrender your rights. Look, I appreciate that that some people have differing opinions to you and I on firearms. That is your right. God bless you for having it. But your abilities on that stop at your front door. What has happened in Australia has opened up and made the entire country essentially a gun-free zone. There are now 32 million people are potential victims waiting for an attack. Just look at Chicago. Chicago has gun laws as strict, or maybe as Australia. Has it stopped the problems in Chicago? No, it's made it worse. If you don't want to exercise your Second Amendment right, as I said, that is fantastic. But you do not have the rights to interfere with somebody else wanting to exercise their rights.
Well, also, it has a great deal to do with it's the standard leftist thing that completely irritates me. If leftists, you don't want to do something, be somewhere, have something, eat something, stand on something, then don't do it. But you're not happy with that until you proscribe everyone else from doing the same thing, because ultimately, as far as you know better than everyone else. And that's absolutely incorrect.
I mean, it's like, every day I get at least one or two emails from someone saying, "Oh, I disagree with what you're saying on your radio show. You should be taken off the air."
Yeah.
And my response back to them is, well, if you don't like my show, why did you listen for 2 hours? It's like a vast number of the people that listen to Rush Limbaugh don't like Limbaugh, yet they will tune in for every hour just to have something to complain about. My God, get a life, people.
It is true. You referenced Chicago. Well, I just found this story in the time that it took for you to speak the past 10 seconds. Here's a story from Chicago 5. That's from this past weekend. 28 people were shot in weekend shootings across the Chicago area. That's just in one weekend. That's just in Chicago, which has some of the most massive gun restrictions, well, certainly in Illinois, and I would submit probably in the United States as well, although New York is not that far away. California's getting there. The story said at least 28 people were shot. Oh, only 6 fatally across Chicago over the weekend, including a teen who was shot to death in the city's Englewood neighborhood. But, of course, the people in Chicago, they don't deserve to have guns. They don't deserve to be able to defend themselves because the police, oh, that's right, these are the police that are told that we can't prosecute Jesse Smollett, a guy that hung a noose around his neck. And we have a prosecutor in that town who decides that, well, poor Jussie, he just made a mistake. I guess that's it. But you're absolutely right. That is the cautionary tale for the United States as well. Final words on firearms in Australia, Jack Alexander, before we transport over to illegal immigration.
Well, you can still legally have firearms in Australia, and you'll be surprised to find out that a Daisy Red Ryder in Australia is considered a firearm. Airsoft. They won't even allow airsoft in Australia because it might be used by. This is the argument that came out in a recent hearing that terrorists might use it as a training tool. Well, are they going? And my letter to my senator said, are they going to outlaw plywood? Because if you look at a lot of the footage from the Middle East, they're running around with plywood silhouettes of AK-47s to do their training, not with airsoft. It's absolutely crazy here that even some Nerf guns are illegal. If they use compressed air or a spring, it's regarded a firearm. I mean, even a crossbow is illegal, is regarded as a firearm. I used to make simulated pyrotechnics for rock bands and so on who were playing in venues where the roof was too small to use real pyrotechnics. They were essentially giant pneumatic compressed air cannons that fired glitter with a light behind them to simulate pyrotechnics. I had to stop doing it because a father of someone in the local scout troop who was a police officer said, that's now considered a firearm.
Jack,
it's crazy. Do not surrender to this garbage.
I am so disappointed in you, Jack Alexander. You glitter, compressed air, firing son of a bitch who would want to actually support crossbows and airsoft guns, and I think probably Nerf footballs are next up, are they not? Or you could do what the UK does. First let's blunt the end of knives, and then let's make sure that you can't have knives. So eventually, I guess in the UK and Australia and possibly coming to the United States, everybody's going to be issued a spork.
Well, here's the thing when it came to knives. When they outlawed the guns, the street gangs started carrying around samurai swords and machetes. So they outlawed those. So the street gangs started carrying large kitchen knives. So, okay, and then a couple of chefs were actually charged with felony possession of concealed weapons because they were driving home. They were a little bit heavy-footed, got a speeding ticket. The police officers looked in the back seat and seen the chef's knife roll. Now, these are tools of trade, and did them for possession of weapons in a public place. So they can't do that. They started sharpening up bread and butter knives on a sharpening stone and carrying those because they were easily concealable. They put metal detectors up in the center of the city to stop that. So then they started making prison shanks out of melting 2 plastic picnic knives together and wrapping them in twine to get past the metal detectors. Now you've got to show ID to buy a set of cutlery, whether it be plastic or metal, when you go out and buy it. It's a never-ending cycle.
A couple of observations from this, and I think they're true. You can't write shit like this. The second observation is it confirms what I've said for decades. When rocks are outlawed, only outlaws will have rocks.
Yeah.
Because sooner or later, you're going to have to get to rocks.
Yeah. And I'm betting that the compressed air cannons that I used to make wouldn't be California compliant because I painted them black.
Oh, God. No, and did you put any little appliances on them to make them look even a little bit more evil? You know, like some a funny little angular thing that nobody can describe? Because that's what makes an assault gun really, really scowy. It makes it really scowy. We can have a scowy. So I hope it wasn't scary.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
It is crazy. And like I say, you can't write this stuff. Okay, 15 minutes left. We're going to get into an area that I'm sure you can expand upon for at least another hour because it affects you personally. A couple of stories that I want to go through first because these are occurring right now in the United States. One of them comes out of New York, the state of New York. And this is from CNN. This just occurred, less than 10 days ago. The headline is, New York passes a bill to allow driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants. Woohoo! New York Governor Andrew Cuomo signed a bill last Monday, that will allow undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses in this state. The measure passed its last hurdle earlier in the day with a yes vote in the Senate. Now, I back that up with a news story, a little bit newer. This occurred roughly a couple of weeks ago, around the same point. This is from thehill.com. The headline is, California set to become... Oh, this is delicious. This is absolutely delicious. And I got to explain why in just a moment. California is set to become first state to offer health insurance to illegal immigrants. And the story is this: California lawmakers have agreed to a budget deal that would make it the first state to offer health insurance benefits to some adults living in the U.S. illegally. Now, this, Jack Alexander, is the glorious part. You've got people in California who can't afford health insurance themselves, actual residents of the state of California, and they're going to be paying for the health insurance of illegals in the state of California, spelled with a K. It doesn't get any better than that. Oh, that's glorious.
Oh, yeah, and you know, it's even crazier than that. I got a family member who is U.S. citizen, and they only work part-time, but they are making, you know, they actually don't make enough money to qualify for Obamacare.
Okay.
You know, Obamacare was supposed to be the savior for anyone who couldn't afford regular health insurance.
Right.
It was supposed to, you know, to open it up for people who couldn't afford it.
Right.
Yet, you know, when these plans, the exchanges and stuff came in, you don't earn enough to even qualify for the poverty level. And they're an American citizen, yet they're bending over backwards and you know, offering premium care to illegals. You know, it's flabbergasting. It's infuriating.
Now, if you don't mind talking about it, I'd like people to understand why it's particularly galling and frustrating to you. And I'll preface this with a story of a French gal that I knew this is back in the 1980s. And she wanted to get into America. And she filed all the requisite paperwork, etc. It took her about, let's put it this way. The last time I had spoken to her in the 80s, she was up to 8 years and waiting to get into the United States. And I do not even know then, because our paths split. I do not even know if she got into the United States. I could not say. But at the time that I last knew her, 8 years and counting, still not a citizen of the United States. That's disgusting. That is disappointing. That's depressing. So you have a story, and let's see, we've got about 9 more minutes to go before the end of the show. but your story is similar too, is it not?
Similar but worse. My immigration to the United States has been a 20-year battle.
Oh, my God.
At the moment, the only visa I can get is a H-1 visa that allows me to come in for 6 months at a time to keep an eye on my investments and so on. I own a house in rural Texas where I'll be trying to get my business set up. And you can imagine, when you're only in the country for 6 months at a time, you can't really do much to grow your business.
No.
Which makes it very difficult. And the constant cost of all of that. I mean, and the tragic thing is, my mother is a U.S. citizen by birth. Her father was part of the Greatest Generation. He met my grandmother while he was stationed here in Australia. They got married. My mother was the obvious result of that marriage. Although she was born here, after the war, after World War II, they moved back. The marriage fell apart. She came back to us. My mother and grandmother came back to Australia. And for the majority of her, or almost all of her adult life, she never knew she was a U.S. citizen. I've got the documentation there to prove that I have a direct familial connection in my mother as a U.S. citizen. But because she didn't spend enough years growing up there, I don't have birthright citizenship. And that's infuriating. The fact that I have spent probably $250,000 over the 20 years.
Wait, stop. Okay, stop right there. You've spent roughly $250,000 of your dollars attempting to become a citizen of the United States. I want people to understand that. $250,000 to lawfully get into the United States. How does that happen?
It happens because they keep changing the goalposts for legal immigrants because of the pressures put on the system, and they keep reducing the quotas. And now I've just found out that the next time we apply for all of this, instead of it being $450 a person to apply, it is now gone up to $1,200 per person, man, woman, or child, on the application.
And
that's without the paying for the police checks, the medical checks, proving that you have all your vaccinations and all that other stuff.
Okay, an observation, just a brief question. Can you start tanning a lot? Can you grow your mustache longer? And can you change your last name? And do you mind? And do you mind getting your ankles moist at some point in the Rio Grande?
Well, I'm to the point now where I'm thinking about going to Tijuana, or taking the family to Tijuana, buying hijabs and sombreros, and turning up at the San Ysidro crossing point, saying, my name is Juan Alejandro Mustafa Mohammed Ramirez, and we are Mexican Muslim transvestites. We are seeking asylum.
Oh, you would. California would open its arms.
We would be in a mansion by Christmas.
Oh, hell yeah! California would be bending all over backwards for you, and
exactly.
You might even get your own cereal box. Hell, you might get your own cereal.
Yeah. Not the first time I would have been on a cereal box, but yeah.
This is Jack Alexander, folks. He's not lying. He's not making this up. This is personal to him. It's beyond the words I said before. It's beyond disappointing. It's obscene.
And here's the other thing in this. I believe in service. 10 years in the Australian Army. The only reason my military career ended was because I was severely injured in a training accident. I believe in supporting the community that's adopting me now. Henrietta, Texas, which is just outside of Wichita Falls, has adopted me as a local. And I believe in that community and the United States so much. I am an unpaid volunteer in the United States Air Force Auxiliary Civil Air Patrol, where I am a second lieutenant. I am serving the country, even at an unpaid level, the country that I want to call home. And every time I see these liberals doing this, I ask them, what more does one have to do? I've opening a business. I've bought real estate to run that business from. I'm serving the country whenever I'm in the country. And I leave within a couple of days before my visa expires so I can remain legal. What more do I need to do to prove, A, I love this country, B, that I am worthy and would be of a benefit to it?
I don't know, another $250,000 or blood? I don't know, one of the two. It's just, I can think of no other word. Jack Alexander, it's obscene that we treat people like this.
Having served alongside U.S. forces in Somalia and in Desert Storm, I think I've also given that too.
I can think of no other way that you could prove your service or your willingness to become a U.S. citizen in any greater fashion. I was being silly when I said blood, but it makes you wonder, okay, what is next?
Yeah.
And it also makes you wonder, and I was listening to I forget who it was, either Tucker Carlson or Hannity tonight. Let me throw this out to you, Jack Alexander, and I'll have you back on the show, or you can be in chat or something like that, because I'll probably bring this up. We've got the debates, the Democrat debates coming up. Who's going to be the first person in the first set of debates? Because I'm guessing there are going to be at least 2 series, maybe 3, because of the number of individuals involved. Who's going to be the first person to pass the Democrat purist test, the purity test, as I call it, to openly and wantonly advocate actively for complete and abject open borders in the United States? Will it be Harris? Will it be Sanders? Will it be Pocahontas? Someone, I believe, will advocate for the complete and wholesale elimination of borders in the first series of debates, and that will then become the standard for everyone else.
It will probably be Joe Biden, because as far as I can see by the way the media is covering it, he is already the appointed chosen one. It doesn't matter whether the others win, lose, or draw. They will get the same lesson in socialism that Bernie Sanders got against Hillary Clinton. If they are delegate rich, they will have those extra delegates taken away and given to Joe Biden. And, so it doesn't matter what he says. He will probably be the first ones to do it, because he already knows that he is the chosen one for the Democrats.
Okay, final question of the night. If let's say, as you prognosticate, that on the Democrat side it's going to be Joe Biden, what say you in terms of a Biden-Trump runoff or election?
Let me put it this way. I hope Mr. Biden has some soothing ointment, because his butt is going to get spanked 6 ways from Sunday.
Okay, there's another reason why I knew I liked you, Jack Alexander. Okay, I got to wrap up the show. Folks, I had Jack Alexander on for the entire 2 hours tonight. I had a hell of a time. It was grand fun. I am definitely going to have you back, because, as I said, I had 50 tabs set up here, and I've gotten through 9 tabs. There's so much more to talk about. But Jack Alexander, before we leave, tell people where you can be found on social media, and then tell people where your show can be found on the internet, please.
Right. Head over to www.jackalexanderexperiment.com. That is my website. I have an embedded player there for my show. My show live streams on Facebook when Facebook is working. Just do a search for Jack Alexander. I'm on The Range, which is on Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV, and so on. If you do a search on YouTube for the Jack Alexander Experiment, you'll also find all of my stuff there as well. And Twitter, at Experiment Jack.
Yeah, and I just followed you today there, and thank goodness I'll be getting a lot of your Twitter stuff now. So, Jack Alexander, thank you for your gracious donation of 2 hours tonight. I greatly appreciate it. So it's 1 o'clock. So it's almost 3 p.m. where you are right now. So I don't feel bad about you at all. At least it's not like midnight or something.
I'll be getting off here and running straight up to grab my 2 youngest ones from school.
Oh, cool. Okay, great. Jack Alexander, thank you very, very much for being here tonight, sir. I greatly appreciate it, and I would love to have you back if that's okay with you, sir.
Oh, anytime. Any time at all.
Thank you very, very much, because there's so much more stuff I want to talk to you about. Honest to God, it was just not even the tip of the iceberg. So thanks again, Jack Alexander. Greatly appreciated, sir. That was a great show. That was a great interview, and Jack Alexander is a great guy.
Monsieur has unlocked!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct right here on the SHR Media Network. If you want to contact me, you can find me on Twitter at BZEP, at BZEP, and on my blog at bloviatingzeppelin.net. Thanks to Big Sarge Media for simulcasting the show tonight on Facebook, and also promotional consideration by the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, and as Jack pointed out aptly earlier in the show, by the Boeing Company. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going.
So will you please
Also to Pratt & Whitney Engines, a thrust you can trust.
tell them
Tiaras are by My Little Pony. Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team, with whom I will be consorting in less than an hour. Thanks to Jack Alexander for being here tonight. Thanks to you, everyone, for being in chat. Thanks to everybody listening in podcast. And for taking time out of your busy day or night to listen. Sorry, no chat show tomorrow. Thursday night, here in the saloon, Alan Thomas, paranormal investigator, Bigfoot researcher.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
God bless.
Good night, everybody. Good night, Mama.
Be safe.
Good night, everyone.
Take care.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, and good luck.